horologia, onde a arte e a engenharia se encontram, onde a criatividade do artesão dialoga com a precisão do cientista. Um campo que reúne engenheiros, historiadores, economistas, artistas e colecionadores. Diferentes trajetórias acadêmicas e pessoais que convergem em uma mesma paixão: o tempo. É com grande honra que recebemos hoje Pierre-Yves Donzé, professor de História dos Negócios na Universidade de Osaka e uma das maiores autoridades mundiais em História Industrial e do Luxo. Em seu novo livro, The Making of a Status Symbol, A Business History of Rolex, Donzé revela como a Rolex se tornou o ícone máximo da relojoaria, símbolo global de sucesso e prestígio. Uma conversa especial aqui, pessoal, com história, negócios, paixão pela relojoaria e pela horologia. Espero que gostem da entrevista. Então, por favor, pessoal, se inscreve no canal, deixem seu like e seus comentários. Obrigado, pessoal. Curte a entrevista aí.
Okay, so before we start, I know I sent you all the questions. We have the different blocks because I believe what the channel, my channel, does as well is really creates a bit of a gap, a bridge, you know, in language barrier that sometimes that we face. And in Brazil, we don't have a lot of content or material related to watchmaking. But yeah, your books are really starting to, obviously your latest book on Rolex, it's been you know, had really good repercussions in Brazil, but also your previous books. So even though you already have a long, you know, history of analyzing the history of business and the history of the luxury industry, the history of watchmaking, maybe this would be the first time that someone is, you know, getting to see you, hear you, and specifically for a Brazilian audience. So very shortly, if I may, Professor, if you could just explain briefly. You were born in Neuchâtel, now you live in Japan. Can you just give a little quick presentation to someone who never came across your work before?
Okay, yes. So basically, I'm a Swiss national. I was born, as you said, in Neuchâtel, and I studied history in Switzerland, in Neuchâtel University. More business history, the history of enterprises, of industries, with an interest for watchmaking. When you're born in Switzerland, in Neuchâtel, you have, you know, that kind of natural interest for this industry. And this is how it started. I finished my PhD in Neuchâtel, and after I started some stays abroad in the US and in Japan as a postdoc to study the industrialization of the Swiss watch industry, technology transfer, competition with the US and with Japan. And after different stays, I happened to get a job in a Japanese university, Kyoto University first, then Osaka. It was some 15 years ago, and you know, just after time is flying, and I'm still here in Osaka, but I'm very happy with that, and it gave me an opportunity to look at this industry in a different way, understanding the Japanese way, looking a bit, taking distance from Switzerland, having a more global perspective, and but I have always stayed in Switzerland because if you're a Swiss national and if you work on this industry, I have always some research projects, some works for companies in Switzerland. So I kind to be, you know, 1 feet in Switzerland, 1 feet abroad, and it gives me maybe a kind of special perspective on the industry between love and hate. Somehow, you know, you must, no, hate me is maybe too much, but you must love the industry to understand how it works, and you need to take distance to have kind of, to be called to look at it in a analytical way. Yeah, objective.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what you mentioned abroad, have you ever been to Brazil? This part of the
not yet. Only once to Latin America. You know, from Japan is far away, as you must know. It's just the opposite of the world, so it takes time. But I would love to come to Brazil one day.
Yes, yeah, you must. Yeah, Japan is very far. I mean, it's a long way from anywhere, at least from the Western world. But Yeah, and I mean, I would love to speak with you because I've been doing some work on. I've been doing a series of videos on the history of Seiko, and but yeah, we can talk a little bit about about that. So you mentioned that you start studying, got a PhD in Neuchâtel as a in history, but obviously, and I think you have such a unique perspective, and I would like to ask you, Professor, what is a luxury product today? I mean, considering all, how would you define a luxury product in today's world?
Yeah, it's a very simple but very complex question because it depends on the person. For some people, some product can be a luxury good, and for other people, it's just a common good because it depends on your income. So generally speaking, because a luxury good is a good which is difficult to access. And this difficulty makes the product special. And it creates a distance, and you want to overcome this distance to one day have access to this good. Why do you want to buy a product which is difficult to get? Because it's kind of a dream, and luxury is based on the dream. The way you make people dreaming depends on this income. We say usually in luxury management that there are two types of luxury. We find it also in the watch industry. Exclusive luxury for the happy few, for very wealthy people, and accessible luxury. An accessible luxury for middle classes, which is not easy to buy, like an Omega watch. It's a bit expensive, but if you are from middle classes, you save money every month, and one day you can buy an Omega. It's your dream, and you achieve it. But a Richard Mille would be an exclusive luxury, or a Ferrari car. For people from middle classes, even if you save a bit money every month, it's impossible to buy one day a Richard Mille. And so that's why there are these two levels of luxury goods, but basically the target is different, but it is the same process, making people dream, and these people want to cross this distance to one day achieve your dream.
Yeah, fantastic. And still talking about these unique luxury items and accessible, not accessible, but I would imagine that they share their own narratives, right? Because Omega, Richard Mille, they have their narratives, they have their storytelling, the heritage. Does that make a big part as well on a luxury item? The storytelling, the heritage, does that involve on luxury as well?
Yeah, it's very important because a luxury good is not only a good, it's not only a product. It's a concept, it's a heritage, some emotional values that you offer to consumers. In watchmaking, it's very interesting because there's a shift from precision instrument that gives you the right time until the 80s, and now it's a luxury good. It's an emotional product because we all have a smartphone to know the right time, or an Apple Watch, and then we don't need a watch as a precision instrument. So we buy it because we love not only the story, not only the concept, but the product. Both are important, and they should be embedded in a general heritage. The story must be linked to the product itself.
Yeah, and I think watches are very unique in that way because obviously they hold in the concept of time, making the key moments throughout history. But I think the development of the watch, which goes back really 1,000 years, it's very fascinating. At least that is one aspect that I love, the development, the concept of time. But how would you refer to the narratives or the luxury item today that is for the middle class, but also for the more inaccessible ones on Swiss made? What is the Swiss made meaning on the luxury item today? Are they luxury or is it that flexible when you consider a watch that is just Swiss made?
Yeah, Swiss made was originally not only for luxury product. A swatch is Swiss made, and it's very important to be made in Switzerland for a swatch. It's part of the identity of all the watches being Swiss-made. Now, the Swiss watch industry has shifted to a luxury industry, but it doesn't mean that cheap watches are not Swiss-made anymore. So there overlaps. Basically, Swiss-made is very important for this industry. It's not only it's part of our identity. It's not only a problem of quality, because we know Japanese watches, even Chinese watches can be high quality. But it's linked to the image we have of the watch in the world. And the Swiss companies were very good for a long time to attach the name, the reputation with the Swiss identity. So it's very important. That's why, especially in the second part of the overlap, for luxury brands, it's important to be Swiss-made. Otherwise, you lack something. Even if you don't use it so much as an advertising tool, because your brand is very strong, but you must be Swiss-made. It's a necessary condition. Rolex is Swiss-made, but they don't need to tell it in their advertisement because everybody expects it and want it. That's why also all the French luxury fashion brands, when they want to add watches, mechanical watches, they come to Switzerland. They could open some factories in Paris or in France, but they don't know. Well, think about Louis Vuitton recently. They invested so much money in Geneva, in their Fabrique du Temps. Why? Because of course there's a kind of ecosystem with lots of artisans, etc. But you could go across the border. But no, it's important. It's a necessary condition. Richard Mille went from Paris to Switzerland to start watches because it's a necessary. It's not enough, but it's a necessary condition.
Yeah. Do you think the other countries could also enjoy the same benefit of having that kind of heritage importance? I mean, a watch from Japan, Seiko, or even from one of the brands, Credo, or a Chinese watch, could they ever reach a status of a luxury watch?
Yes, for a community of collectioners and for people who know about watches, they recognize. Think about Grand Seiko is very famous among people who love watches and know about watches. But if you don't know so much about watches, you don't think that Seiko is really luxury. So that's why there's a difference between what I call this necessary condition of being Swiss-made that is lacking in some other countries. So that's why companies in other countries must make a bigger effort to be recognized. It's not a natural link in the mind of worldwide consumers. With a good watch from Japan, from China, from anywhere actually. But it's not natural. In the mind of the global consumer.
In Japan, do they view Grand Seiko or Credo in the same level as a Swiss-made, a luxury Swiss watch? What's the general question?
No, not exactly. It's very interesting in Japan and for Grand Seiko, because Grand Seiko became very famous outside of Japan for watch lovers, but not so much in Japan. And that's why they struggle a lot. In Japan, Grand Seiko is still the image of a watch for old men, not very fashionable. And because they have Grand Seiko since a long time, and it was not really cool luxury goods in the past. It was much cheaper, much simpler, and it's very hard to change the image while you have on the same market Rolex, Omega, and all Audemars Piguet, all these watches. And I would say if a Japanese man, because it's especially for men, a Japanese man would have some $8,000-10,000 US for a watch, he wouldn't buy a Grand Seiko, but a Cartier or Rolex and Omega, because of the image. And this is something very, very difficult for Grand Seiko. This kind of divide. And for a long time, the company also had a different communication strategy to talk about Japanese craft and tradition abroad, because also Japan has a very good reputation nowadays around the world. But in Japan, it doesn't work. And so they hadn't this communication strategy.
That's
But I
very
believe now they try to merge these both markets in one single big global market.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, no, Grand Seiko has been doing really well, and I think some of the variations they have on Grand Seiko recently. Yeah, I think some of the most beautiful dials are Grand Seikos. It's
exactly. Yeah, the idea to have a representation of Japanese nature, with 4 different designs around the world is very, very good. And it's linked to some Japanese land crafts, and they use also artisans to develop dials.
Yeah.
Very, very, very well done.
Yeah, even also Citizen has some very interesting pieces, though. The Citizen, but they also have the dial, but that kind of folding paper also. So I mean, there's a lot of heritage, and I think those Japanese brands are really starting to break through and offer something new in the luxury market, at least for so different narratives that we see from the traditional Swiss watch industry. So if a brand, is it possible for one brand then to start at one level and then build up and become, if we think of a pyramid, they always talk about the pyramid of watchmaking. So is it possible for a brand to start at the base and then work its way up? Or is that something you only acquire through centuries and centuries of history? Or how do a brand can position itself?
It's very difficult. Actually, it's very difficult to be successful to climb up the price scales to luxury. Usually it doesn't work, because problem is how consumers look at you. Why are you getting more and more expensive? Why should I buy you today? You were so cheap before. So it's maybe the product change, but the narrative should change, but the brand stays. It's very, very difficult. And many brands made in the watch industry made some mistakes like that and lost reputation. Zenith was a very good example to try to go up too fast, and people don't follow. Say, oh, come on, why Zenith is now it's completely different? It used to be much more accessible. What has changed? Just an envy of the company to make more money, or what is the point? Tag Heuer was at some time under Babin was a bit did it well, but at the end it was too high, and so it's very, very difficult. What we can observe, because usually companies do not have only one brand. We have small companies or a big like Rolex, but many companies that try to go up, they launch new brands. That's what we observe. That's what Swatch Group did. When you really want to go to luxury, you buy Breguet, and then you do something different. LVMH is trying, but with lots of difficulties. That's why I think they invested in Louis Vuitton watches for that, because it's very hard to bring your brands up. So you have something different. And this is a more successful way, usually, to keep intact brand position, narratives, heritage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was very interesting what Richemont did with Montblanc and Minerva. I think that was a great marriage, if I can put it that way, between the brand, which was very well established in the accessories, it already had its own history, and Minerva, which I think that was a good combination. Would you say so?
Yeah, exactly. This kind of combination and respect for the position is very, very important.
Fantastic. Brazil started, as I mentioned, starting to have a bit of a watch industry. It's a huge market, huge potential here. I think brands are starting to realize the potential that it has. I think we have some traditional owned Brazilian brands like Tecnos, like Orient, which Orient also has is very strong here in Brazil. We also have Seculus and Magnum, which are popular brands that really have wide base in the market. But now we're starting to see some brands. I don't know if you know an independent brand called Statera, which started recently.
No, I don't.
I'll send you some information. They've been doing some fantastic work. 2 guys out of Brazil. They went to Switzerland, learned the craft, and applying some traditional watchmaking, but in a Brazilian way. So they're fantastic story. So what advice would you give to both brands that are well established and has already, several, maybe over 100 years here in Brazil? How can they capitalize on the rise of interest and the potential that it has? And what about micro brands, independent brands?
Yeah.
How can they, how can they position themselves? How can they become a successful and long-term business model?
It's very, very difficult because not only in Brazil, but everywhere in the world, and especially in Switzerland, nowadays there are so many new brands, but only a very few survive after a few years. So it's very, very tough, and there's not magic way to do it. Otherwise, everybody would do it, So what is important? I think thinking about positioning. You don't need to be only an artisan with a good idea, but as we said before, luxury is a product and a concept. So this is very important, not only having a good product. The good product is very, very important, but what is also important is the message you want to tell to consumers. Why is your brand different? This is a point. This is a position. You need to make a bit marketing looking at competitors and understanding where you want to be and where you want to go. And based on that, you develop also your concept. Otherwise, competition is too tough. You don't have anything special in comparison with competitors. So a nice concept, new materials. These days, lots of new materials, new ceramics, new designs. And but it's not enough. You need to embody in a concept. Like Hublot was one of the perfect examples under Beaver. The concept of fusion. It's not only new ceramic. It's fusion. It's tradition, modernity, old and simple materials, new materials. So you need something different. Not only being a good artisans, because there are so many good artisans.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Going out to the next block of questions that I have, I think I can just summarize. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because it's an issue that we see not only with Rolex, but also with other brands and some other luxury brands, even Audemars Piguet. What do you think of the waiting lists that there is? I mean, are they a marketing strategy? The scarcity of the product, is it real? Is it something that held and manipulated by the ADs? If you could just give me, overall your perception, I would love to hear your thoughts, if you may.
So scarcity is important in luxury because you must make the product difficult to be purchased. And this difficulty, as we talked at the beginning of our discussion about what is luxury, you must create distance. It must be difficult to access, but not too much. Otherwise, the business doesn't work. And this balance is very difficult to achieve, and companies manage it. So when scarcity is managed, of course, but at the same time, if so many people want to buy your product, you don't need to manage anything. There is a kind of natural scarcity if you don't follow with increasing your production. Audemars Piguet, as you said, is a very good example because they increased both, it's Benemias who did that, increasing both the envy from consumers and the production. But the envy increased faster than production volumes. So they can always argue, we increased production, but as we are artisans and we want to ensure quality, we cannot follow the demand. Yeah, it's half true, but it's also useful not to follow the demand because you can increase prices and make it more difficult to follow. A good challenge, an example of this is Rolex. They will open a new factory in Switzerland to mass produce more and more Rolexes. And this is something very sensitive, which is where do you put the limit of this balance? Everybody in the world wants to have more Rolexes. So maybe they estimated there's still, a gap to fill to keep the envy and the distance while selling more. Here also, there's not a magic technique. What is important is always to keep the balance, not to fulfill all the demands. But if you cannot only survive based on envy. You need sometimes to offer products, otherwise competitors will take you. And on mapping is very good if you think about the royal oak. Who makes everybody wants a royal oak. So it's difficult to buy it, and there are so many competitors who make kind of imitation of royal oaks to answer this envy. And so that's why you are not only on the market. It's difficult to know where you put the limit between envy and increasing production.
Absolutely. I don't want to go, here, but I don't think Ben Amias did the way he repositioned Audemars Piguet was fantastic. I think he really made the brand sexier, that's the term they use, and really got it going across with multiple sports celebrities. I think he was a bit of a showman himself, but there's no deny that he did a fantastic job. I don't particularly like the 1159. I think that was also was a bit boring, the design and everything. Great, but I know the workmanship behind it is fantastic. But you see a lot of, there's a lot of dependence on the royal oak from Audemars Piguet. And when you look at the other brands that are even going the same way, Girard-Perregaux, Blancpain with the 50 Phantoms, there are a few brands that are going the same way. It's very dangerous also, because they're working on a perceived value of this one particular item, and if the bubble bursts, their whole business model might go down the drain.
Yes, exactly. This is the business of iconic models, and having an iconic model that you can identify directly the brand. Usually it's very useful. Many brands try to have iconic models, but they cannot have one. It's very difficult to build one. So when you have, it's a very important asset. But of course, you need to renew it. And Audemars Piguet is very good for that. To renew it, to launch new versions, to innovate, with materials, with different new techniques, but you keep the core design intact to make the iconic product visible. And Rolex also is very good for that. With the new models, the Land Dweller or the Sky Dweller before, there were fantastic technical innovation. The design is intact. You recognize instantly it's a Rolex. And this is why iconic models are important. Keeping intact and keeping the interest of the public, it's very important. That's what you should do. Jaeger LeCoultre is a good example of a failure with the reverso. The reverso used to be a very important iconic product. That's diversified too much. They didn't focus so much on it, and now it has lost, maybe for a while, but at least now it has lost all its power.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And what about the gray market and the secondary market? What's your overall perception on the values and the impact and the importance that it has on the watch industry today?
It's very, very, very important for some brands. For some other, for most of brands, actually, when you buy the watch, it loses value. It's a common trend. But there are a few exceptions, a few very known brands, Audemars Piguet, Patek, Rolex, and a few iconic products that can, well, it's not an absolute rule, it depends on the market, but it can increase value. And in the last 5 years, it has increased fast. Now, maybe a bit, it's going down a bit. But we need to differentiate between brands and companies. I would say it's still kind of exception just for a few brands, and all the companies would like to achieve that because it's a recognition by the public, by watch lovers, and it increases a lot, not only the price of watches, but also the envy, as we talked before. In luxury business, envy is very important because you must create the envy and the dream. And even for people who do not know about watches, it doesn't mean that they want to sell it again, but it means it's AP is a good watch, Rolex is good watch because even when you buy one, it increases its value, and for the brand reputation, it's really very important. After the dark side of his business, what companies would like to avoid is people who just invest in a brand. They don't love a watch, they don't care about the product, they just want to make money and to speculate. And that's why it's difficult to avoid that. It's what Rolex try to do now with trying to control that, but you cannot control what people, where do they sell their watches if you can sell it for a very important price.
Yeah, if we could jump in Rolex, and if you would love to hear your thoughts on why is it so secretive? Why does the company keeps everything so control? I mean, we don't know production, we don't know the costs, we don't know maybe all the factories that they own, or we don't know, people who work there. They're not allowed to share much information, give interviews. Why does Rolex do that?
Yes, it's a very important point. To secrecy of Rolex is a key component of the reputation of the brand, of the specific image of the brand. Why everything is secret? Because there's no need to talk about Rolex. You just need to look at the product. It's the best, and it's finished. It's a very simple position, but very strong, because it started in the 60s, about 60 years ago. So they kept this position for 60 years. And it makes the brand very, very specific. Nobody talked about the companies, the brand, how watches are made, etc., as you said, because there's no need. We have made the best product, period. It's very powerful, and
yeah.
And it works. It works. The only thing is just look at the product, and there's no need to talk.
Fantastic. Rolex is a foundation. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell me what are the advantages and why is a foundation? And if it is a good business model, how come other brands never went on the even family-owned brands, Patek Philippe, or never went on the same route?
Yes. So first, it's a foundation because the founder, Hans Wilsdorf, had no children, but he didn't want to sell the company to investors or to be purchased by another one. He wanted to keep the company intact, and so he made a foundation, Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, and gave his company after his death to a foundation, and he asked the foundation to take care of the company, to keep it intact, so they cannot sell a Rolex. And so that's it, because no, it's a problem of succession after his death. And then what are the advantages? So foundations are two advantages. The first one is that you can keep everything a secret, because in Switzerland, according to Swiss law, foundations do not need to advertise any numbers, anything about the company. That's why nobody knows anything about how many watches they sold, what are gross sales, etc., etc. We don't know. Okay, and it's good because competitors do not know, and so it's very, very important. So the first point. But the second, much more important, is about finance. It gives the company a very important financial strength. They don't have other shareholders. So they don't need to distribute dividends like Sword Group, Richmond, and others. They don't need to spend money like Richmond to purchase your own shares on stock market to keep investors happy. And so there's not a waste, if I can call it a waste of money because you are listed. You can reinvest most of your money in development of the company and to reinvest in finance. Actually, Rolex is kind of financial company. They own lots of financial products. They invest in stock markets around the world, in real estate properties, and this brings back more and more money. So they have so much money that they're independent from banks, from financial markets, and it keeps everything secret. Because if you start to need a loan from a bank, you need to tell the bank, what is the state of your business, and they can purchase any company like they did with a Bucherer recently, the retailer Bucherer. You buy cash, whatever is the cost. It gives independence to the company. And this is very powerful. Now, as you ask, why do other companies do not do that? Well, first, if you are listed, it's very costly to get out of the stock market and buy all your shares. So it's impossible. And for small family firms, because I think it's simple to transmit to the next generation. If you are just a traditional company, maybe it's easier to get loans from banks or something like that. Actually, there's a second watch company which is owned by foundations, private foundations, the Victorinox. Not Swiss Army knife and watches. It's owned by two foundations linked also to the family of the founder. It's much smaller anyway than Rolex.
I think one person that has been key on the development of Rolex was the CEO Andre Reiniger. I think he was very influential in keeping the sort of mystery and the methodology that Rolex has today. Could you elaborate on that? Could you tell us what were some of the decisions he made that allowed Rolex to maintain this secrecy, this juggernaut of a company and watch industry, luxury item and dream?
Yeah, you're right. He was even more important than Wilsdorf, I think, to build a luxury brand. Wilsdorf developed high-quality Swiss watches. Rolex, the Oyster Perpetual. Then Heiniger made it a luxury product. It was not an excellent watch only, it was an excellent watch for excellent people. And this is the luxury strategy. He started in the 60s. Heiniger became CEO in 64 until 92 or 93. So for 92, for nearly 30 years, it's very, very long. And he implemented the strategy in the 60s and kept it for 30 years. And this strategy is working with American advertising company, J. Walter Thompson. And these Americans invented the luxury strategy. So the American told the Swiss, stop selling high-quality watches because everybody is doing that. All your competitors do the same. Omega, Longines, etc. You stop talking about the product. You start talking about people who buy your product. They are excellent people. They are the best. And because you have the best watches. So this is start of the discourse on excellence. And Heiniger understood that, started to work with this New York-based agency, and they made Rolex a worldwide success story based on the discourse, the narrative on excellence. That's why there was nearly no crisis, even during the quartz shock. No crisis, because Rolex was no more watch. It was a narrative on excellence. And of course, you need an excellent watch to have this narrative, but it's not, the product is no more the core of communication.
Yeah.
And it's no more an instrument. If Roger Federer is wearing a Rolex, it's not because a Rolex helps him to win a tennis play. There's nothing to do. He wear it after the play. It's because he's excellent. He is, one of the best, so he needs a Rolex. And it's the same in culture. When you have Placido Domingo, having a Rolex is not, to direct an orchestra. You don't need a Rolex. It's because you're the best. You have, of course, a Rolex. And this is an invention by Heiniger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like you said in your book, excellent watches for excellent people by an excellent entrepreneur. Was that?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Do you think, you mentioned it, and I was wondering, do you think the quartz crisis had an impact on this strategy? Do you think it strengthened it? Or what sort of impact if any, did the quartz crisis had on the Rolex marketing?
It has nearly no impact on bad impact on the company, because Rolex was no more a watch, so it didn't care if Seikos were cheaper and more precise. It was no more a watch. And I think what is very important, the very positive impact, is that the management understood that it works. It's a very strong position. And in a so big crisis where all the Swiss watch industry is collapsing, we are still very strong and growing. And so when you experience that, you become very aware that it's really the true strategy to have, and you must keep it intact.
Yeah, absolutely. And you even mentioned at the beginning of your book, I didn't manage to read all your book. I'm sorry, but I'm still reading it. Was it very difficult to get archives and some of the history of the brand, wasn't it? Did you reach out to Rolex and say who you were, that you wanted to do research in a book, and what sort of response did you have?
Yes, I contacted the CEO Dufour. I informed him about my project. We discussed together, but they didn't open archives. But I didn't expect them to open the archives. They never did to anyone. But anyway, I wanted to be frank with the company, to tell them about my project. And as I had already a long experience in researching the watch industry, I knew very well about archives everywhere. The Swiss federal government, different partners of Rolex. That was the communication agency in New York. We can access the archives in the US and in the UK, and different partners around trade unions, etc., etc. So I knew I could have enough materials to understand how this company developed.
Yeah. Do you see any resemblance between the Japanese watch industry? I know it's very recent, because he pretty much started with Gintaro Hattori, in 1881, when he started his factory. And then I know he went through a very tumultuous time, because after that, it had the Kanto earthquake, it had the wars, it had, he joined, and the Axis. So it's a very troubled watch industry in a way, but always very focused on Seiko. How do you see the Japanese watch industry today? Because I'm starting to see more independent, smaller brands as well. I mean, you have Seiko and you have Citizen and Orient as well, but how do you see the industry?
There's no middle. There are three big groups: Seiko, Citizen, and Casio. Of course, Orient, but mostly with three big groups, and lots of now independent producers, artisans. But there's nothing between them. And the challenge is to help these independent producers to grow. Because being only an artisan is good, but if you want to grow, it's difficult. You need a company, finance, investors, and there's no ecosystem like we would have in Switzerland or in Europe, with groups that purchase brands that help you to develop, etc. An ecosystem of suppliers. So in Japan, it's possible to be independent artisan if you need everything by yourself, but growing to a mid-sized company, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think Switzerland was very unique in the way that you allowed for as you said, the ecosystem to create the watch industry. Absolutely. I mean, Rolex is such a unique such a unique brand with very unique characteristics and features. But do you think other brands could learn something from the Rolex model in terms of business, in terms of marketing, production? What would they be? What lessons could they teach?
I think the most important you can learn from Rolex is the consistency of the position, of the strategy. Then, every time there's a new CEO, they don't change the strategy, they keep it and strengthen their position. So this is we talked about that just before, from the 60s until now, there's the same strategy because they have found the right position and they keep it. And this is what I think many brands could learn, to keep a good position and to think in a long-term perspective. Of course, when you're a listed company, think about Richmond. Every time you have a small downturn, you change the CEO, try to change the position, and so on. So it's when you have a pressure from financial markets, it's difficult. But this is what shows Rolex: the long-term strategic thinking.
So when April comes and there's watches and wonders and all the brands have their releases, I'm like eagerly expecting something new from Rolex. No, I'm wrong. I should never expect something new.
No, they have novelty, but novelty in tradition, as I explained, with the land readers and the sky readers. The message is the same, communication is the same, the design is mostly the same, but you have innovation in it. And but it's still Rolex. And yeah, it's easy to say, but very hard to do.
Yeah. Do you think there would be the watch industry would be as it is today without Rolex? Do you think we would have this diverse and complex and so many families and conglomerates without Rolex? Do you think Rolex is central to the watch industry in the world?
Yes, they have integrated a lot of companies by purchasing suppliers, but they still work with hundreds of independent suppliers and they support them. And these companies also, they make these other companies, they make the ecosystems, they supply product to other companies, and that's why Rolex has an invisible but very important impact on the ecosystem.
Yeah. Fantastic. Do you go to Watches and Wonders and the fairs in Switzerland, or
very uncommonly? No, I don't know. I don't go so often. Yeah. I go if I'm invited by a company, but usually they are very busy talking to retailers and consumers and journalists.
Yes, I was lucky to go last year. Hopefully, I'll go this year. I went this year. Hopefully, I'll go next year as well. This is a question that I usually ask all the people that I interview, and I've been very fortunate to speak from people with different areas of the watch industry, and again, as I said, bring them to Brazil in a way that I think video is the way people consume knowledge and information these days, and hopefully this can stay and inspire people in the future. So I'd love to hear. I would love to hear your definition of time. What is time for you, Professor? How would you define time?
Time is the most important luxury because this is what we cannot buy, and what we, that's what I can define time is what we should enjoy every second.